Yo, it's finally time for me to bring my first deep dive of 327. I have been anticipating and thinking about my first deep dive since the league was announced, and initially the plan was to start with Kinetic Rain, do a bunch of experimenting, take it to instacking, and eventually make a new deep dive essentially on instacking, because that new skill theoretically was going to be inspiring enough and different enough for me to do that, but that ended up not being the case. However, I re-rolled into this build, Cast on Critical Strike, Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice. Now, if you played last league, in Mercenaries League, and you paid any attention to the meta, this is no unfamiliar build. Perhaps you didn't play the Cast on Crit version, or didn't see the Cast on Crit version, and just saw the self-cast version, because I think the self-cast was more popular. But me personally, I don't care for the self-cast gameplay. I tried it last league briefly, and it just wasn't my thing. But I love Cast on Crit, I love Cyclone, and so I figured I would attempt that version of the build. And so that's where I am now. And you can see on the screen here, this is a little bit of a different deep dive, because the character that I personally have in the league is not anywhere near done. Something you would have noticed in the previous deep dives, with the exception of maybe the Molten Strike of Zenith, between the Impending Doom Elementalist and the instacking Kinetic Blast Deadeye that I had, they were basically both done and didn't have much more to go. That's not the case here. I have 3 different sets of stats laid out here. I have one for the medium budget stats, which is the showcase you saw in the beginning. That was the medium budget stat character's footage. The sheet you see here was that character's stats. And then under that, you have, and I went through Poe.ninja pretty meticulously to find what I would consider to be the best of the characters in the league. And this guy's character, his name is Wand So Good. If you want to find him on Poe.ninja and inspect even more, or just like see if it updates, because I'll have his path of building linked in the description, but if he makes changes, it won't update there, but it will update on Poe.ninja. So that's his character, and it's really interesting because I kind of thought, like, speculating that I could get this character to about 100 mil DPS. That's what I suspected would be like the kind of like the cap, with like perfect gear and everything, and that is essentially what I just saw with his character, was the perfect gear that I envisioned, and he's basically sitting at 100 mil DPS perfectly. So that's good. I have a good prediction there, and then I'll be able to get there. But you can see my character in the middle, and my character is actually a lot better. I think it's probably a lot tankier in mapping situations than that other character, but it's like at a point though where it doesn't really matter. Like, his character's plenty tanky enough to deal with almost anything. And he's not wearing Aegis, but we'll get into that later. Yeah, so my character in the middle here, you can see I'm only at 20 mil DPS at the moment. It's barely up from the medium budget stats. It's only 25% more damage. And the ES is essentially the same. However, the survivability is quite a bit better. Putting on Mage Blood allowed me to get basically double the armor I had before. And I will just mention now that the only upgrades that I've made since the medium budget character to the Mage Blood character I'm using now was the Mage Blood, the Forbidden Flame and Flesh with the Liege of Primordial. I got a couple of better clusters, and I got a new dagger and Awakened GMP. And those are, I believe, the only changes I actually made. So there's still a lot of things to be done. And I'm still learning. But it's a very, very comfortable character, and I'm plenty happy to keep grinding and get the upgrades, because it's very fun. So with all those stat sheets out of the way, I'll just have this new system here. It's going to be for every single deep dive, I'll have this rating system over here. Everything's just rated out of 10, how I feel about it as just performance overall. Trying to avoid any kind of bias that I would have toward the build, because I will have some. I say the mapping is a 9 out of 10, and that isn't to say that it clears the map like a 9 out of 10 necessarily. It is really, really fast and good, when you have Mage Blood. But I have to also factor in if you don't. And if you don't have like incredible movement speed, right? You're lacking some movement speed there. And so Cyclone kind of just lags behind because you have to get next to things to proc your crits. So like you just automatically won't clear as well as something that's ranged. But once you get to the Mage Blood thing, you're kind of getting there to where you may as well just be playing a ranged character with the amount of speed you have, but it's still not quite there. I mean, I basically, I'll put it like this. Kinetic Blast is a 10. And if that's the 10 gold standard, then this is a 9. With Mage Blood and all that. And maybe a 7 without the movement speed and stuff with Mage Blood. But so it's a very good mapper. But another reason it's getting a lot of points here is because it is using the best mapping defensive layer that has ever existed in the game, which is Aegis Aurora, where you stack armor and energy shield. And I'll go over that again pretty shortly here. And then bossing, I give it an 8. And I'm being kind of generous here, to be honest, but it's basically my character right now. I'd give it a 6, but because I know that it will get, like, if I doubled my damage right now, then it would be an 8, right? 20 million DPS is not super comfortable against Ubers. As you saw in like the gameplay demos, I was struggling on Searing Exarch because I have minions, the golems, and if you have ever done the fight with the golems, it's really annoying. And I just was barely not quite tanky enough to tank as much annihilation as I wanted to. So yeah, overall, like, I need to get more damage, but I know that when I do, I won't have to deal with so much of that stuff. And so I know that when I get there, it'll feel like about an 8. And I think that like I said, my character's tankier in mapping. The Wand's So Good character over there is like astronomically better in a situation like that fight. So Aegis does work there, but not very well. Certain boss fights are just going to be like that. And as for the budget, I gave it a 6 because I think it has a decent entry-level price. I don't think that it really works very well without spending like 50 to 100 divines. But when you do spend that much, it's really good. It's like maybe one of the better 50 to 80, or yeah, 50 to 100, I'll say, divine entry cost builds of all of the ones that are in that category. I think it's like maybe one of the most comfortable mappers that you can get for that budget. It's just very nice. And then I have complexity here, and that's a 7, not a 1. Because admittedly, there is something about this cast on crit stuff that still kind of confuses me, and I kind of just use Path of Building to get past this dilemma, which is understanding the balance between your attack speed and your cooldown recovery rate of your Forbidden Right. It's a thing of breakpoints, and I don't fully understand. Like, it seems like it's probably pretty complicated math for someone like me, and so I just have to kind of mess around with in POB to see what kind of, like, if I get attack speed here, is it gonna make my DPS go up or down? And once you tinker with it enough, you start to get kind of confused, and it's kind of irritating, to be honest. But there's something to it, and I think maybe I'm just really stupid to not be able to figure out what's going on, but either way, I end up getting to where I want to get. It's just a matter of tinkering in POV, so that to me is enough to make it slightly complex, and maybe you could argue that Aegis Aurora is a slightly more complicated thing to set up for someone who doesn't know much about the game, but aside from that, it's really just the complexity between the cast on crit attack speed of your Cyclone versus the cooldown of your skill. That's it. And then I have a league starting rating here. If you were to league start this character, how good would it be out of 10? And like, you can't league start this build. It doesn't work because there's just a mandatory unique item that you have to use that drops from like Uber. I don't actually know if it drops from the Ubers now or not. It's the Whispers of Infinity amulet. So you literally can't play it at league start. But I have it listed as 2 because I don't just mean like immediately playing the build. I mean, like, you started a witch and you're playing whatever, and then you're going to roll into this character. It's still not a high rating, even if you do that, just because if you, like I said, it's like that 50 to 100 divine investment to get the thing feeling good and actually working. I don't consider that a good league start type of mentality, because I'm thinking like opening weekend in like the first 3 days. So is it realistic for someone to get to that point in the first 3 days? The average person maybe watching this video, I don't think so. So I'm just going to say 2. Obviously, you can league start it if you want, though. Nothing stops you. It's just if you really want to do it. And here is the table of contents for this video. I think a couple of these things, maybe 1 or 2 of them are going to be missing, but probably not. I'm not actually fully done with this slideshow thing yet, so some of the miscellaneous stuff is maybe out. But I don't know, we'll see. So every deep dive will have basically every single thing here. Starts pros, cons, best content to run, mapping style, bossing style, expected budget type stuff. Goes over all the skills, different sections for those, just like before. And then the gear, starting with mandatory uniques, and then everything down below. And then the passive tree, where I'll just go into my tree. I'll talk about the tree, and then I'll show you just very briefly, if you don't know, how to find trees for your specific setup, if that would help you. And then there's this miscellaneous stuff, which is like the pantheons and going over my specific character in the game. If I have some kind of alternate setups, I could go over those, and yada yada. The list goes on. This is table of contents. You can look at this if you need to. There will obviously be everything timestamped. So let's talk about the pros and cons about the build. To be honest, it was really hard for me to think about cons. It's basically just these 2. I can't think of many others. At least nothing meaningful. So let's start with the cons, because it's shorter. It does have limited damage scaling. I don't think it's very much so possible to get past 100 mil. I think that guy's character at 100 mil is pretty much sacrificing as much as he possibly can to get that number, and there's not really many other ways to scale it, which is a typical chaos damage thing to happen. It's just a bit harder. Like strength stacking is maybe the only chaos damage that actually sort of infinitely scales like an int stacker does. So I think 100 mil is about where it's going to cap out, which is totally fine. You don't need more than 100 mil for anything in the game. Well, maybe some super deep delve, obviously, but you know, so just it's got some limited damage scaling. And I think that when you're between that like 10 and 20 mil range, it starts getting really expensive to get like meaningful upgrades to your damage. So that's something I would consider. And then obviously that is a bad league starter, and I just went over that, so you know what I'm talking about. And then for the pros, there's so many, man. Like I could put more on this list, but I won't. Firstly, it's a very tanky mapper. Aegis Aurora, I'll say it again, it's just like the most solid and comfortable mapping experience of a defensive layer that I've ever touched in the game. It does chaos damage, which if you don't know that's a plus. That means it can't be reflected to you. I think generally monsters have lower chaos resistance than ally resistance. There is Wither that you can use to just like get a crazy almost double damage multiplier if you can get 15 stacks of Wither. Yeah, it's just a really solid thing. Goes through energy shield. Any energy shield mod in the game that you can roll, it just doesn't even matter to you. So chaos damage just always feels really good for those reasons. It has insane recovery, Aegis being the primary way of recovering, but it also has really solid leech. You're leeching a lot. And then you'll probably end up having a Watcher's Eye with the energy shield on hit with discipline modifier. And it's really good because you're cycloning so fast, you're hitting so many times a second, and your Forbidden Rite shooting out like over 10 projectiles, and they're all doing it too. So you're getting a lot of ES back. And that isn't considered leech, so if a map says that you can't leech, it's still okay because you'll have that modifier. It's also really good for things like delve, or something like players deal no damage 3 out of every 10 seconds or whatever. Like a mod like that is really nice because you just leech through it anyway. And you still get some life regen converted to ES regen as well. You could even take Divine Shield and you'll regen even more. But yeah, you get constant consecrated ground pretty much from Bottled Faith if you're using Bottled Faith, and you just convert that to ES regen with Zealous Oath, and if you have the Legion Primordial thing where your Stone Golem's giving you a bunch of regen, you convert that. And yeah, there's just a lot of recovery going on here, and it feels really good. It can run basically all map mods in the game. I think the two hardest ones to run are less defenses. I just literally skip that every time because it's just so counter Aegis. You could probably do it on a non-Aegis variant that doesn't rely on that, but it's still iffy. And the less armor and less block chance one can be really annoying, but only if it's like paired with other things that are annoying as well. So it basically runs all of them. Another pro is that it's Cyclone gameplay. If you haven't played with Cyclone before, it just feels really good, right? You just hold down right click and you're just doing everything with one button. And you also get to move while you're doing your damage, and which is a huge bonus. If you've played PoE 2, you understand like being able to move while you're shooting a bow or casting a spell feels really good, right? And there's very, very, very few ways of doing things like that in PoE 1. And Cyclone is one of them, so that always just feels good. The build gets really fast with really good investment, which is important, right? Nobody wants to play a slow build. It's very adaptable, like honestly, so you're going to notice a lot of things in this thing, in this deep dive, and a lot of the stuff isn't, like, this isn't the best way of doing things necessarily. There's a lot of different ways of doing everything on this build. And if you have ideas or you want to fit things in, and maybe even just experiment, like just do it, because there is actually a decent amount of room here to play in whatever kind of way you want with your character. If you go on Poe.ninja, like almost every character has a slightly different setup at least, which is really cool. I like that kind of stuff. It doesn't use mana because of the Whispers of Infinity amulet, and so you get to reserve literally every single point of mana that you have, and you don't have to worry about things like mana siphoners draining all your mana, blah blah blah, list goes on. It just feels really good to just not have to do with mana at all. And then obviously if you have the MTX, which I don't, you can get Celestial Cats in this little picture here. And who doesn't like the Celestial Cats? And here's a really long list of things, right? So this is the things, essentially the content that you should target or avoid. Now the truth is, it's basically good at almost everything in the entire game. And that's why it excels at is just most things, because it's just good at most things. That's just the truth. And I can only think of 4 real weaknesses here. Number 1 being the single target DPS. Like I was saying earlier, like breaking out of that like 10 to 20 mil. And I'm talking about Ubers here. 10 to 20 mil is so fucking, that's so much for any regular Pinnacle situation or any map situation. So I'm talking about Uber here. And yeah, breaking out of that 10, 20, try to get like 40 for like comfortable Uber DPS, skip phases and stuff. Really hard to break out of that. So I consider that a weakness. It's not inspiring for Legion either. I mean, Legion is basically, it's basically made for ranged characters, right? Like it's just so much better for ranged characters. So if you like running Legion, this build will be kind of awkward. It'll still clear. I mean, it's just going to be slower than any ranged character like a Wander would be doing it. So I just wouldn't roll this character if Legion is your favorite thing to run. Damage over time is obviously a potential weakness, because if you're playing Aegis where your biggest recovery method is through blocking, if you're relying on that at all, then damage over time is going to screw you over sometimes. And like I said, there's a good amount of leech, and there's also a decent amount of ES regen, but if you have nothing to hit, something like a Uber Elder fight or something, and you made a mess in the arena and there's just a shit all over the ground that's damage over time and you have nothing to hit, well, it's going to be annoying. But that's it. I mean, it's mostly a skill issue thing, to be honest. And then mobile enemies are kind of annoying sometimes, just because it's a projectile that takes a second to land where it needs to land. And so they can be frustrating, and Cyclone also slows you down a bit, and if it's a really fast monster, you're trying to keep up with it while you're cycling, it can be frustrating, but most builds are like that, so yeah, that's it. I mean, most things it's good at, so not much to talk about there. And here I just have a little thing about what you do while you're mapping, right? So you literally just hold down Cyclone, and the only other buttons you'll ever press is Withering Step while you're cycloning. And by the way, if you press it while you're cycloning, it's not going to stop. Like, you will get the full duration of Withering Step, the elusive buff, until you press something else. So if you stop cycloning and restart cycloning, then you'll take off the elusive buff. And if you press Vol Haste or like Frostblink or something, well, you can't Frostblink actually during elusive, but say you press Vol Haste, then it will also cancel it. But it's kind of nice because you just get a nice movement speed buff and some phasing, and you just get to run through everything. And I use Vol Haste just because I like having a movement speed buff every once in a while. So I press Vol Haste, then I start cycloning, then I press Withering Step, and it's just a really nice speed boost. But you do not want to use Vol Haste while you're trying to deal single target damage, because it will probably mess up that fine thing I was talking about between attack speed and cooldown. It will mess it up. So just don't use it while you're dealing DPS if your character's set up correctly. And then for the bossing style, it's the same thing. But you probably want to use Frostblink more than Withering Step if you're worried about getting hit and like actually dodging mechanics, because Withering Step, when you use that, it puts Frostblink on cooldown and vice versa. So I think Frostblink is great because you can use it while you're channeling, and when you hit the unique enemy, Frostblink goes on a really low cooldown, so you get to press it really quickly again. So I prefer holding off with Withering Step, unless it's a boss where I know I don't have to deal with mechanics. Then obviously I want to get the withers on them, so I'll be pressing Withering Step. But it's the same. Just remember that you are moving and you can dodge stuff while you're moving. Stay close to the boss, get around him if he's casting something, you know. So for the cost of the build, I think you should, for the medium budget, expect to pay between 50 and 100 divines, and probably 80 is a really solid place to land yourself. If you have an idea to roll into this build, I think 80 would be a really good place to start. And then going high budget, going from medium to high budget, I personally think just waiting until you have the Mage's Blood money from the medium budget character that's capable of running most of the content in the game. I think you should just hold on like I did with buying an upgrade until you can afford the Mage's Blood, just because the Mage's Blood will accelerate the rate at which you farm for every other piece so much faster than any other piece would do that for you. So basically, if you got a bunch of damage upgrades and stuff on the medium budget one before you got Mage's Blood, it's not really going to make you go faster and farm faster to get to the Mage's Blood. It might unlock maybe killing some Ubers comfortably, but Mage's Blood will make you start zooming and completing content so fast that you'll get to the next things very quickly. And I think personally, I think the first upgrade after Mage's Blood that makes the most sense is the Liege of the Primordial, Forbidden Flame and Flesh. Because it's just a really comfy generic buff to everything you have. And I don't know how expensive it's going to be this league. Last league, they were like 300 divines a piece. But I personally bought mine for 50 total. One of them was 20, one of them was 30. And they have gone up to, I think, 50 and 30. So it's getting really expensive. And if it gets to the point where it gets so expensive where it doesn't make sense as a next upgrade, then just ignore it and try to move into a different upgrade, because they might get really ridiculously expensive. But if they're affordable, I think it's a really good choice. And so now we're going to talk about the skills. So this is the links. You're obviously going to be running Cyclone, and this is the same links for everyone, by the way. However, what I will say, I forgot to write it here. If you don't have Awakened GMP, it's technically better to use Greater Volley. It gives you like slightly less of a detriment to your projectile damage. So if you care at all about like 5% damage, then Greater Volley, just use Greater Volley. It's technically better before Awakened GMP, but once you have Awakened GMP, that's way better. But yeah, so you have Cyclone, you link it to cast on crit, and you want to get this one awakened as soon as you possibly can. It's like a lot better than regular cast on crit, and it's because of a mastery on the passive tree that gives +3 to the level of support gems, and obviously Awakened, they scale off of level a lot better than regular. And then obviously Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice, which is pretty basic. It just shoots a bunch of extra projectiles, and the idea was the downside would be that it costs a bunch of extra life, but we don't care about that, so we just get all the upsides without the downside. And then your GMP, and you want to get this Awakened GMP probably last, just because it's really expensive, and these two aren't that expensive. Power charge on crit, because you're stacking power charges, so this is just the most efficient damage link at this point after GMP. And then the last, and well, it's considerably stronger than every other choice here, the Void Manipulation. The only other choice that makes sense here, if you wanted to, is increase crit multiplier support. But this, it seems like no matter what point your character's at, Void Manipulation is just always better. At least Awakened is. If it's not Awakened, maybe increase crit and multi, but Awakened obviously levels your Forbidden Rite up by 1. So it's very, very powerful. And not very expensive to get the Awakened version. And so now I'll talk about the auras. I think these 5 auras are like by far the most common set of auras run by the people playing it. We got Determination because obviously you're stacking some armor here for Aegis. Zealotry because you're just doing crit. So Zealotry is like the most efficient damage aura you can have. Tempest Shield because we need that for spell block. That 25% spell block becomes 50 with glancing blows. Discipline because we're just energy shield. CI energy shield, of course. And Flesh and Stone for generic damage reduction, which works really well on this character because the way that we're dealing damage is cycloning into enemies, and all of those enemies will be very close to us, which means we get the full effect of the 19% less damage taken from them. And then I've seen some people running optional auras here, mostly for the Watcher's Eye synergies between Precision and Clarity. And then some people are doing Sublime Vision with the Discipline mod, and so they're running Arctic Armor with the Purity. So there's things to look at on Poe.ninja if you want to find out more about those alternative aura setups. You can just look at like any other characters that's running Cyclone plus Forbidden Rite on Occultist, and you'll find a bunch of different random synergies and stuff that you might prefer over the normal set. When it comes to movement skills, man, you can just pick what you want to do. I personally like Withering Step because that's handling my Wither for the time being until I end up doing the Balance of Terror setup much later. So that's doing my Wither, but I also have Frostblink on because I want to have that option during boss fights to Frostblink to dodge things like I was mentioning earlier. But I've seen people running Shield Charge with Flame Dash. I mean, you just do whatever you want. If it works on your character, then you do it if you want. And that's all you need to know. And then we have the utility skills here, and this is what I use. And when I say that, everyone basically uses Molten Shell and everyone uses Assassin's Mark, but on the right side you have Summon Stone Golem, and this is kind of something I saw, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'll run this because I don't know what else to put on. So Molten Shell is just the most obvious guard skill to use, right? Because you're stacking armor. And you always get the max buff here, the 5k damage that it can take. Just a really good thing. I link it with automation. You can do cast when damage taken if you prefer, but I like automation. And then yeah, you just do Assassin's Mark with Mark on Hitch. It's the best curse you can run. And so I use the Summon Stone Golem thing. This is pre-Lead of the Primordial. Once you have Lead of the Primordial, you don't use this at all. But before you do, if you want to have a Stone Golem, a really easy way to always have one is to do a cast when damage taken setup with the Stone Golem, because something you'll notice about Aegis is like you're still taking the damage on Aegis. So I have 80k armor, and so I'm recouping like 1800 energy shield every single time I get hit. Or every time I block, 75% of the time I get hit. You're still taking the damage though. And so you're going to be getting hit a lot, and you're still going to be taking the damage even though you don't even notice that you took the damage. And so this actually ends up being a really, really commonly sustained a live stone golem, surprisingly. I thought it wouldn't even really work, but it does. So that's nice. It just gives you some more stuff. You can use a different golem if you want. Like you can use flame golem for damage and AoE, or even the ice golem for crit and stuff, but I like the stone golem personally. But yeah, if you're using Lead of the Primordial on your Flame and Flesh, then you can just equip any of the other 3 golems you want, or 2 if you don't feel like taking the mastery or the golem wheel on top of Witch. Here's some miscellaneous skills. I run the Vol Haste just for that movement speed buff like I was talking about earlier. You don't have to use it at all. I don't think I've even seen anybody else wearing it. I just like it. And then I've seen some people running Frost Shield, and I might start using this pretty soon. It is kind of nice. It's essentially another guard skill. In Ubers, it's really nice because you can place this thing down. I used it a lot on my Impending Doom Elementalist, and it's very noticeable. You place this thing down, and it'll suck some ES out of you for a minute, but it gets to its 4th stage really quickly in just over 1 second. And once it's there, it's going to absorb a hell of a lot of damage for you. So getting 1 hit is like really hard to do when you have this on the ground. And you also get some free spell crit. So it's cool. I definitely think it's good to run it. So just go for it if you want. And now we're on to the gear. And firstly, I'll talk about the mandatory items because it's the most important thing to talk about. So first and foremost, the absolute most crucial thing that you need to have, no matter what, these 2 things are technically not mandatory, but I consider them basically mandatory. But this item, Whispers of Infinity, is absolutely mandatory. You cannot play this build without this item. The entire idea is converting that life cost into ES cost, so you can actually use this. And yes, this amulet got nerfed a lot this league. It used to be, what was it? It was like 200 to 400 max ES before. Now it's 50 to 100, but whatever. A little bit less ES is fine. So yeah, don't even think about rolling this build if you don't have this amulet or aren't going to buy it, because you just need it. And I think right now it's like 5 divines. I think it's going down in price too, because it's not that common right now for people to be playing with it. And then the second thing here is the Thread of Hope, which again, it's not mandatory, but it gets you your Glancing Blows node. You want the large roll on the Thread of Hope. It gets you the Glancing Blows node with basically no travel points sacrificed. So it's extremely efficient for getting that node. And I think I consider it mandatory. I've seen characters who aren't using it, but I think that they're just being inefficient and incorrect when it's so easy to get this thing. It's not even that expensive. So just run it. You do want this. And again, it's on the large ring size, large. And then there's Aegis Aurora, which I think basically this item is mandatory for this build because it's so strong. Until you're so jacked, like the character I have linked in this thing, the Wand So Good character. If you're as jacked as he is, then you don't need it. Once you have that much ES and you have basically 90 L-res and 100 mil DPS where things die before they can actually do too much to you, then you don't need Aegis anymore and you can take it off. But until you get to that point where your character's just like over the top strong, I consider this mandatory because it's just way too good to not be doing. There's just too much obvious synergy and it just works too well. So mandatory in my eyes until you're OP. And I guess while I'm here, if you didn't know how it works, it just recovers energy shield every time you block, equal to 2% of your armor. So that's why I say if I have 80k armor, I get 1800 ES every time I block. Instantly. There's no delay, it's just instant. So it basically ends up making it feel like you're not taking any damage at all. And now we'll talk about the dagger. So this is my dagger in game. That's the one I upgraded to. The one I had before on the medium budget character is the exact same thing, except it didn't have attack speed. That's the only thing it was missing. And attack speed, I think it's so basically I'll put it like this because I know it's this whole like breakpoint thing's really annoying with the cooldown recovery rate and the attack speed stuff. Just get the attack speed on the dagger and then worry about all the other sources of attack speed. Go dagger first because it's the most impactful one. It's going to be the highest impact of attack speed gain on the character, so start with that. And then anywhere else there's attack speed, then you start tweaking and figuring out your like where it's optimal and where it's not through POB. So that's a mistake I made, is I prioritized having everything except for attack speed, and it was actually a mistake for on the medium budget character, and I had to make up for that with spectral tigers and this and that. But yeah, so the priority list is, well, you need hits that can't be evaded. If you don't have that, this build is just gonna suck. Like maybe if you have Lead of the Primordial with the Ice Golem, you can maybe get away with not having it, but I mean, there's just no point. Just do it because it's just GG. And then crit chance, because obviously you need to be critting to proc your thing. Then crit multi, because crit multi is like vital for all your damage. And then attack speed. I think attack speed and crit multi are in the same category of importance here. I think that 3 and 4 are basically the same. And then there's spell damage and spell crit. And if you're not using Aegis for the shield, you basically just want to get a really nice titanium spirit shield with as much ES as you can possibly get, and one that would be filling in any other gaps you have. The shield I have here on the screen is the one from the One So Good character. 450 ES, which is quite good, and then he has a tier 1 int roll and tier 1 fire resistance here, and a tier 1, or +2, I guess I should say. It's not tier 1 actually, +3 I think is max, but +2 to maximum lightning resistance. So just you can get a shield that does whatever you need it to once you're at that point. And for the body armor, we're stacking ES on a Twilight Regalia. For the affix priority, I think the mana reservation efficiency of skills essence mod is mandatory. Because getting every single one of the auras that I run out of the 5 that most people run are all sort of equally important. And so you kind of have to make sure that you're reserving all of them. So getting 10% on the body armor like this is extremely important because there's just not many other ways to... we really don't want to sacrifice any more passive tree points or like small clusters that have reservation efficiency, and we're already taking everything on the tree. I'm personally even using an Enlighten 4 with the socketed gems have 90% multiplier corruption on my helmet. So it's like you gotta invest a lot to make sure, and so basically just I consider it sort of mandatory to have it on the body armor, because if not, you're gonna have to sacrifice way too much somewhere else. And then obviously the next most important thing is to get as much energy shield as possible. The one I'm wearing only has like 950. It's self-crafted. I just put something on that would work. I'll be recrafting it. I want to get at least like 1100 on mine. This is the one that One So Good is wearing. This is probably his worst piece of gear, to be honest. I actually think it's crazy that he's wearing this. He could easily, like, his character's so high budget, I don't know why he doesn't just have like a 1200 ES one, and his resistances are like tiered fucking 5 and 6. I don't get it, but looks like he settled on something he shouldn't have. And then yeah, so after the ES, I think resistances are really good to get here, because you're gonna end up wanting to do Melding of the Flesh at some point, and so getting resistances on your gear feels really good. And then intelligence, and then you can craft the % increased attributes. Everything else is kind of just like whatever. You know, if you need to craft something else like resistances for the time being, like I do on mine, then go for it. And then for the useful implicits, these are the 4 I could think of. I think Fizz Taken as Chaos is my personal favorite for that slot, and Aura Effect is my personal favorite for the other one, but most people are using Crit Multi for spell damage, so that's probably technically better, but I just like scaling Aura Effect personally. And then Max Resist would be another thing you could do, +1 to max resistances if you aren't using Melding of the Flesh yet, so that's a thing you can do. And there might even be a couple other options, I just don't think that they're worth talking about. And for the helmet, I think almost every single person wears the Crown of the Inward Eye because it's extremely budget friendly. gives you a bunch of damage, gives you a good chunk of armor and ES, and you can get a Corrupted Implicit, best one being +1 to max power charges. But if you're having the reservation issues, you can do the one that I use, which is the Socketed Skill Gems 90% multiplier here. And if you're really rich, I don't even know how much these cost, I didn't price check it. You can get one like this, bunch of ES, +1 to max power charges, which is insane. And nearby enemies have -2 to Chaos Res. This thing is a beast of a helmet, and it's absolutely better than Crown of the Inward Eye in just about every way, but it's going to be very expensive. I would assume it's going to be in the like 200 divines plus range. For the gloves, it's so simple. And I also forgot to mention that these like Twilight Regalias and the Warlock gloves here, you can get the Fractured Bases for like less than 1 divine because of the goddamn Genesis tree. So crafting this stuff is like really, really cheap this league. So I would say it's worth trying to roll really good mods because of how cheap all this stuff is. But for the gloves, basically you just want a bunch of energy shield, some intelligence, attack speed's nice. This is one of the things, like you can get a pretty big number here, so this could be one of the things, like after you have that dagger with really high attack speed, this could be your next place to get more attack speed and tinker and POB with it and see how it turns out. And then resistances, like I said earlier, it's just nice to have resistances, and if you want stats, you can, like attributes, you can get attributes if you want, but the only natural rolling one that'll comp on a Warlock glove is the intelligence, though, so it has to be crafted or essenced. For the boots, there's 2 options. These are my boots in League, and it's really funny because this whole time I thought I had Tailwind, but I don't. I don't know, like when I went to buy these, I was like, dude, these are such a good deal. Like, holy crap, I'm getting 200 ES and 25 movement speed. I get the cooldown recovery rate, and I get Tailwind for, it was like 20D. These were 20 divines. I think I got ripped off, man, because it doesn't have Tailwind. I thought I had Tailwind. Hilarious. This whole time I've been playing thinking I had Tailwind, but I didn't. But here's the priority list. And movement speed, obviously, you don't want to boost that movement speed, so that's just number 1. I think the cooldown recovery rate is number 2. It's really, really, really rare stat, and being able to get 20% on your boots is like, makes it really kind of mandatory almost for me if you're going to have rare boots. It's just too good to not have. And then I'd say Tailwind, which I don't have because I'm stupid. As much ES as possible, intelligence, then resistances again. And if you want to, and a lot of people do this, a lot of people are doing this, you can do the Ralakesh setup with max power charge. Here, it actually solves your Corrupted Blood too, which is nice. And then it also lets you put on the Malachi's Loop Shield, which is a huge damage boost. So if you just want more damage, you don't care about wearing the Aegis for whatever reason, if you just really don't want to do that, then this is a really good option. You can do Ralakesh with the Malachi's Loop. You're sacrificing a lot of defense for a lot of offense, so it's a trade-off. Here's the amulet section. We already went over this amulet. I just put it here because it has to have something here. But yeah, Whispers of Infinity, everybody get your amulet. For rings, they're entirely up to you. Whatever you can afford / want to wear. I'm personally wearing like just a regular, I think I bought a fractured 2-stone ring with, it had 16 all-res fractured. And I was using that to solve resistances. This is pre-Mage Blood. Now what I'm going to end up doing is buying a synthesized base later with +1 to power charges, and then I'm going to mirror that with the Calandra's Touch. But there is one thing to mention here. This Foulborn Lay Hoop of All ring is so good for this, because we're scaling 2 vectors of defense, global defenses. So it goes up to 30% increased global defenses. That feels really good. And then it goes up to 30% crit multi as well. And then you get a good chunk of all res, and you get a good chunk of attributes. It's just a really feels good item for so cheap. So I definitely suggest wearing this if you're on a budget. You could even wear 2 of them. Nothing's stopping you from wearing 2 of them. But yeah, the synthesized bases, I'll just mention now, they're going to get really, really, really expensive. They always do. So I'm trying pretty hard to get one right now before it gets too crazy. But they're already kind of going faster than they're going up faster than I'm making money. So unlucky. For the belt, There's kind of only one option that makes sense before Mage Blood, which is using a Stygian Vise. Because Storm Shadow is pretty affordable, of course, and you really want to have ailment immunity. Everybody just wants to have ailment immunity. So basically what you do is you buy a Stygian Vise. It's a high item level. And you use the essence with a Void Shock on it. And you craft your belt with that. You can see mine has 57%. And then what you do is, once you have a belt that you're satisfied with, you can also get an Abyss Jewel with another X% of chance to avoid being shocked. And in this case, I only need 43. I think I have like 48% on it. So I just get my shock immunity through the belt and the jewel inside of it. So your belt slot is covering the entirety of your Storm Shout ailment immunity. It's a really, really comfy way to solve this issue. And literally everything else on the belt, just get whatever you want. Resistances, energy shield, stats, whatever it is you like. There really isn't much priority here. It's just whatever you need specifically. So, and then obviously Mage Blood's best in slot. We're not going to talk about that. Everybody knows that. For jewels, this is really interesting because there's a lot of stuff going on here for jewels. This build has a lot of interesting jewel choices. So I think one of the most efficient, unique jewels that you can get is the Rational Doctrine. This is going to give you Profane Ground against any single target ever. You're always going to have more intelligence and everything else, so you're always going to get this Profane Ground proc. And Profane Ground gives you 100% crit strike chance against the targets that are in it, and a little bit of Curse Effect, which I believe does scale the Assassin's Mark slightly, but the 100% increased crit chance just feels really good. It's just really nice. This isn't a mandatory jewel by any means, but it does feel really good, especially because if you have this dagger with really high crit, like 11% or whatever the base is, this 100% goes a long way. And then I'll look at the Watcher's Eye first here. There's basically 4 mods that I think are worth your time. There might be other ones, and like I said with the stuff earlier, there's auras you can pick to run just because you have a Watcher's Eye with the mods. That is something that could apply here, like crit multi with precision, or maybe even attack speed with precision, stuff like that. But these are the 4 that I think are the best. The energy shield on hit with discipline, I think, is like one that you should basically just always have on your Watcher's Eye, no matter what else it has. Crit chance on consecrated ground. When enemies are on consecrated ground, you get crit chance. That's a good one. It's a zealotry one. Another one, which is the one I use, is increased damage taken for enemies on conc ground. So it's another 10% more damage modifier. And then if you want to get some crit damage reduction, then you're running determination, so you can get up to, is it 60? Something like that? 60% crit damage reduction on a Watcher's Eye, which is quite good. With the other node on the passive tree, that gives you 90% total, so you're basically crit immune with that modifier on a Watcher's Eye. So those are the 4 I like. And then when it comes to Forbidden Flame and Flesh, I basically wouldn't even bother buying them unless you're getting Lead of the Primordial. I don't think Shaper of Storms is worth it. I just put it there because the only thing I can really think of that's like actually really useful, that's worth 2 jewel slots, but it kind of barely is probably. Especially because we get a free shock, 15% shock only, but we get a free shock from the graft. Yeah, Lead of the Primordial, if you can afford it, though. It's so good. So consider that. And then 3 more useful things here. Obviously, I'll just mention now Storm Shroud. Obviously, we know what's going on here. If you can get it, just get it and do the Storm Shroud setup. It's just really good. Militant Faith, though, is very important. So you want to have it always the Dominus modifier, because that gives you this Inner Conviction node, which is 3% more spell damage per power charge. I think I only have 7 power charges right now, but still, that's 21% more damage. It's just really, really good. And as far as like the devotion mods on it, there's only 2 that really do anything, which is Aura Effect and All Resistance. I think area damage technically would work, but it's not meaningful enough to scale. But I would say All Res is the most important thing to get here, because it just makes it way more comfy to cap out on resistances. And there's the Balance of Terror with Inflict Withered for 2 seconds on hit if you've cast Despair in past 10 seconds. This is really, really good for single target damage. Withered, it increases the amount of chaos damage an enemy takes by 6%, so each stack of Withered is 6% more damage for you. And you're hitting so fast, you're going to be maintaining 15 stacks basically the entire time if you've cast Despair in the past 10 seconds. So you're talking about a big damage multiplier. So at some point I'll be wearing this and slotting in the Despair and doing that for bossing because it's tremendous. And then as far as rare jewels go, it's basically what you'd expect it to be. You're just going to want to stack crit multi as much as you possibly can. And max energy shield. And then if you have things you need to solve, like attributes, resistances, mana reservation, you can get those. I have mana reservation on 2 of my jewels. So I have 6% coming from my jewels. And that allowed me to put on one of the auras I'm wearing. That's one of the ways I made room for the auras. So they're pretty versatile. But the 3 best strats, like everything at the top is like the best. These top 3 are like really, really valuable compared to anything else. So try to look for those. Some of them are going to get pretty expensive. And for flasks, we always use Quicksilver, always Granite, and I think always Basalt. A lot of other people don't run Basalt, but I personally think it's like really insane not to run it, but whatever. And then you can basically decide between Silver and Diamond Flask. If your POB says that when you put on a Silver Flask, your damage goes down because of the attack speeds messing around with your cooldown, or maybe even you don't have enough crit and you need to get some crit, then a Diamond Flask is going to be better. But if POB says that your number goes up with a Silver Flask, and if you already have enough crit and you just want to go faster, then Silver Flask is better. So it's just up to you between those two. I don't really think there's an argument to be made for any other utility flask. And for your suffixes, you basically want to get % armor, crit effect reduction, of course, crit chance if you need it, movement speed feels good, spell leech is fine. And then if you have a Mage Blood, deal with your Shock Avoid here. And if you need the resistances, you could do Elemental Resistance and replace something from the other set. Yeah, flasks are pretty basic. When it comes to unique flasks, there's 2 choices. As far as I know, there's no other choices here. I think Bottled Faith is just kind of better in general. I think it's just better than Dying Sun. But if you like Dying Sun and you want the AoE and just like maybe more map clear, and if you have so much, maybe you have 100 mil DPS and it's more efficient to use Dying Sun to immediately burst down a boss or something, then go for it. I am a fan of the flask. I just think Bottled Faith is too good to pass up here in this slot. Up to you. And now we're going to talk about the passive tree. So I'm just going to go in game here and just kind of talk about the tree a bit. So this is my tree for the character I have in game with the Mage Blood and the Lead of the Primordial setup. So one thing you'll immediately notice probably is that I have this Golem Wheel. You don't take this if you don't have Lead of the Primordial. If you have Lead of Primordial, you can take this and get your 4th Golem. If not, don't worry about taking this. I'm choosing to do a 3 cluster setup. This one is the only one I have that I don't like the way it's rolled. It could be better. These ones, I believe, are both identical. 4 attributes, 4 rally res, 35 effect. 4 attributes, 4 res, 35 effect. They're both missing energy shield, but that's when it gets really, really expensive. So I just wanted to solve my res and attributes through my cluster jewels, and so that's what I chose to do here. And I do advise using at least 2 of these clusters. I think that the 12 passive ones are the best with 35 effect because they're going to solve so many holes in the build at the same time as doing you a bunch of damage. But some people run the notable clusters for chaos damage instead, save themselves some passive points and do some more moving on the tree. This is... Wow. I'm not going to cut this out because I'm not a pussy. This whole time, I haven't even been using Inner Conviction. I forgot to spec it. Well, we're going to ignore that for now. But, you know, I'm new to the build. I just rolled into it yesterday, so give me a break. So anyway, Jewel sockets are really powerful in this character, so, and also max power charges, right? So you really want to come over here and grab this. This is pretty important because you get a power charge and a jewel socket. Obviously your CI, you grab this wheel for some slight reservation and aura effect. I take the mastery for aura effect. And this is where you slot in your militant faith. You can see I have the all res and the aura effect because it's not actually expensive to get. At least it wasn't when I got it. Then I take this node for the reservation mastery. So obviously it's nice to get the devotion here. There's other places you could get it, but this one's just the best because you want the devotion. Why not? Power charge stuff here, of course. Chaos wheel with chaos pen, using Runegraft of the Fortress for global defenses. Energy shield here. I don't actually know if this is doing anything, I'm going to be honest, because the cooldown of 0.10 seconds and my attack time goes down to about 0.10. I don't think there's ever a situation in which you can actually proc again, but I just left it on because I just left it on. I like, sometimes Frostblink doesn't need to go on cooldown, sometimes Withering Step's available to use again, so, you know, it's there. Here's one of the flame, or this is the flame I'm wearing. Here's a medium cluster jewel. It's really useful if you don't have your block cap all the way. You can get Stoic Focus here, which gives you 5% attack and spell, which turns into 10% with global, or glancing blows. And then Precise Focus gives you some crit chance and crit multi. This is my Melting of the Flesh, almost perfect roll. Here's the wheel for increased defenses from your shield, and then also getting some crit multi for each 10 ES, which this one has 292, so I'm getting 29 crit multi. Taking a crit wheel here, you take this +3 to level of all critical support gems, which includes Awaken Cast on Crit, so it goes to level 8, that's why it's so good. You have a reservation wheel here that you have to take, basically. Oh, for Zealot's Oath, that's also a thing. Another power charge here, and the Thread of Hope goes here, so you can allocate Glancing Blows. There's nothing else worth allocating here, it's just Glancing Blows. I choose to take this wheel for some crit reduction and armor and ES. This seems too valuable to not take. And I really like this mastery. Recover 5% of your ES over 1 second when you take physical damage from an enemy hit. You're getting hit all the fucking time. So you're getting this, you basically have 5% ES regen while you're mapping, right? It's just basically getting you 5% ES regen, which is really strong. More recovery. Gotta love recovery. The last cluster over here, and then this is where I put my Rational Doctrine, and this is my Watcher's Eye with the 26 ES on hit and the 10% more damage mod for Zealotry. I am not using Spectral Tigers anymore, because if I have it in POB and I do the 32% attack speed, I actually lose DPS right now, so that's why I'm using Withering Presence, which is what you do if you don't use a Bloodline, you use this one. And that's my tree. And now what I'll do is I'll show you how you can use Poe.ninja to inspire you and give you direction for the trees you're supposed to use. Okay, so probably most of you already have done this, and just skip this if you don't need to know this, but this is Poe.ninja. This is where I go every single day. If I'm ever looking into upgrading my character or looking into roll into a new one, I always come here. This is my most viewed, other than the PoE trade site, this is like my most visited PoE like extension website type thing. So when you're here, if you want to see builds, you just click builds here. Now, if you're interested in seeing meta stuff, you can look at this list down here. It shows like the percentage of people playing specific builds per league, which is cool. This is a new feature, actually, I'm pretty sure. Just like this whole thing being right here. But yeah, we're going to click Keepers League, that's where we are. And so you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your tree or your gear or your skills or your whatever. First thing you'll want to do, in our case, we're playing Occultist. And you want to find Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice. And you click that, and now it's filtering everything for that skill. But more importantly, you want to find ones that are doing cast on crit, right? Because that's what we're doing. And so we don't want to see all these self-cast ones. So what we also do is click on Cyclone. And now every single character in this list is using Cyclone and Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice, which means every single one of these people is doing Castle on crit. Now, something I like to do is look for my own character, and not everyone can do this because not everyone's on the board. But if I did this, like let's say I'm like, okay, I want more damage. So something you can do to get a gauge on how much more damage can you reasonably get is I look at this and I say, okay, mine says 1.4 mil. Now that number doesn't actually mean anything. It's not calculating your DPS correctly, right? But it's not calculating anybody's DPS correctly. And so if mine's 1.4 and I want to know how much can I actually reasonably increase my damage by, well, now that now mine is 1.4, I can look at other people's numbers and say, oh, holy shit, there's somebody here with a 6 mil number. So that guy's got like tremendously more DPS than me. And I'm going to look at him and see what he's doing to get damage. Let's see if I can find the guy that, what is his name? Juan So Good. Yeah, here he is. Like I saw his 6.2 mil number and I'm like, I got to click on that. So I open his page up and now I can scout everything he's doing. You know, you can open it up in POE and do the calculations yourself. So like how it says 6.2 mil here, when you do the calculation in POB and it's the actual DPS, that's when you get to that 100 mil number. So like I said, there's nothing, this number doesn't mean anything other than it's relative to what yours says. But he's got, like I was talking about in the slides, +1 power charge on the helmet, +1 power charge synthesized ring that he's reflecting, and the balance of terror with the inflict withered. So he's doing like all the stuff that I know is like the big juicy damage upgrades. So he's doing the whole thing. He's also using in Bottled Faith with increased duration too, so it's like has better uptime than mine does. Stuff like that. It adds up. So if you're trying to figure out how to do more damage, then you can do that. Now, if you feel like I'm really tanky in maps, but when it comes to bossing, I keep getting one-shot by stuff, which is actually something that my characters sort of experienced in that Searing Exarch fight. Well, you can use the EHP number here to get an idea of your tankiness. You can use this and say, okay, the tankiness I feel I'm going to associate with this number. And so you can once again go look. It's like mine was 110k, so let's find people with like really big numbers. Like this guy has 552. Now just be careful with EHP because it's not very accurate in general, even when being relative. But in this guy's case, what you do is you open this up. You see he has bigger here, right? Okay. Go back to my character. I forgot to do this. My character is 111, but these are the numbers that matter the most, right? Like if I'm getting destroyed by this like specific elemental skill, like the Annihilation was destroying me in the Searing Exarch fight, well, my numbers are 72k for max hit here. And this guy, whose character was way tankier, by this number, which we don't actually care about, it's just we have to use this as a relative thing to the max hit because it does count. And then you come here and look at this, and you look at his max hits. And I can sit here and obviously immediately say, okay, what's the most obvious identifiable reason this guy has a much higher elemental max hit than I do? And it's because he has 90 all res. I have 85. And yes, that 5% makes almost that much of a difference. So these are things you can do. And then if you wanted to be like, all right, well, let's see what he's doing with his tree. It's different than mine. I can open him up in POB and get a really good look at his tree. And you can already see he's doing a lot of things differently. A lot of things. He's still coming over here to grab this because he needs to. He's using a Megalomaniac. This one has ES and spell damage leech. This one has area damage and extra AoE per power charge. He's got basics of pain for crit and damage. He's using very similar clusters, but his are much better because he has the ES on them. He's choosing to get block and resistances on his jewels. He's got CB immune on his jewels. He's taking this wheel for more block. I saw he has an impossible escape blood magic because he wants to get endurance charges and more max or more chance to block. Matter of fact, what he's done is crazy because he's not using glancing blows. He's getting his max spell block without it, which is even better because glancing blows obviously means you take some of the damage. You still take 65% of the damage, but he doesn't at all. So he has 78% block, and when he blocks, he literally doesn't take damage, and he's recouping whatever ES, which for him is, or armor, which he doesn't have a whole lot of armor, but it's still going to be meaningful because he's blocking all of the damage. So it's a much more effective thing for him. This is a much, much better defensive character than mine is, for example. And so now I pulled him up and I looked at the stuff, and those are identifiable differences, and, you know, do your configurations to see exactly what the stats are. And just get familiar with this website because, like I said earlier, this build's really adaptable, and you should take advantage of that and learn a lot through this website. Make changes that you think are good and experiment. And then we have miscellaneous section starting here, starting with pantheons. Major pantheons, if you don't have Storm Shroud or Freeze immunity, then just take Soul of the Brine King for your Freeze immunity. If you want help with critical strikes and maps, you have Soul of Solaris. If you want overall mapping comfort, Soul of Lunaris. Minor pantheons, if you don't have immunity to corrupted blood and bleeding's annoying, or one or the other, it doesn't matter, then Soul of Ralakesh is good. And then if you don't need that, then there's some nice fizz damage reduction in Soul of Gruthkul. I don't think anything else is worth really even mentioning. I've never really even thought pantheons are worth mentioning, just because I think people really can identify what the easier or what the one they want is. It's not very complicated, but just in case you didn't know, these are good choices. And now we're on to just my character, so I'll just talk about my character a little bit here. I guess I'll go over the gear because I went over the tree already. So this is the dagger that I showcased earlier. This is almost as good as it really gets. It's really hard to do better than this, which is fine. It doesn't need to be better, but yeah, it only cost me 20 divines, I think. Not a very expensive thing. I didn't craft it. Didn't want to bother crafting it. I'll obviously have some instructions at the end on how to craft it if you choose to. So there's that. There's my helmet with the 90% implicit. My Whispers of Infinity, which was like a pretty low roll. It's a mid roll. This is the ring, the Foulborn one that I'm wearing. It's just good. We'll be replacing it soon. Here's that ring I was talking about with the fractured resistance on it. This was doing a lot of heavy lifting for me. Gives me my dex, gives me some flat ES, does a lot of resistances. The gloves don't have attack speed on them. I could craft attack speed on them, but resistances are a little bit in need there. Fire and lightning. That being said, I could probably transform the cold res on this to something else and whatever. And the boots that I thought had tailwind and don't. This is a really high rolled Aegis. The only roll on it you can really care about is the armor and ES at the top. Shoot for like 390 plus, because it's not expensive. And then my body armor, which is the one that I want to recraft. Only 970. And I'm running Aura Effect and Fizz Taken's Chaos. And the flasks are just armor suffix on the Quicksilver, curse effect on the granite, avoid shock on the basalt, and crit chance on the sapphire. With the Dying Sun, use when you hit a rare or unique enemy. And these are the graphs which I need to improve. This one's for the shock. 15% more damage. Gives me a little bit of movement speed too, and a little bit of spell damage, but it could be way better. Falling crystals here. This is the one that's like completely useless, basically. I don't really know what this is even doing for me, but it was giving me 10 dex, and that was like solving my problem for a little bit. I was like, whatever. I'll just keep it there. And as for the gems, everything you saw on the gem thing was entirely what my character's wearing. And This is about the speed that you cyclone without any buffs. If you pop Withering Step, you go get faster. And like I said, you don't break Withering Step until you press another button. So like now if I let go of, well actually, so press it again. And now if I let go of Cyclone and press it again, now the elusive buff is gone and then it starts going on cooldown. So that's how that works. And if you notice, when I press Withering Step here, my Frost Blinks are grayed out. You have to wait until you lose the elusive buff and then it goes on cooldown and then you can Frostblink, which is why I was suggesting that you not use Withering Step all the time when you're in boss fights that you actually have to dodge stuff, because you want to use Frostblink for that. But yeah, that's the character. I mean, there's not really much to say about it. It will be getting upgraded tremendously soon, and I'm just going to keep farming Strongbox. Alright, and the last thing I'm going to cover before I show the crafts is the two Bloodline Ascendancy choices that are possible and useful for this build. One that I used pretty frequently to sort of allow myself to do that tinkering in the POB with the attack speed to cooldown recovery ratio is the Spectral Tiger on crit strike through the Feral Bloodline, which you get from killing the Feral guy in the Beast area. And this will spawn a tiger every time you crit. And yeah, they're not going to survive all the time, but the thing is, every time you crit, they all get full healed. And you're critting literally every single time you hit, right? So they never actually die. And even if they do, they immediately get summoned back. So what this means is you get a grand total of 125% crit chance and 35% attack and cast speed at all times. So this can really, really help you get that crit chance to 100% on Cyclone really easily. And it might even might help you balancing between the attack speed and cooldown recovery. So that's choice number one. Choice number two is one that I don't think I'll ever use because I don't think it will work if you have Lead with the Primordial. You're too socket starved. But the one that a lot of people are running is this from the Owl Crystal King guy from Delve. If you kill him, you can get this Ascendancy, where the only thing we care about here is this one. Action speed cannot be modified to below base value if you have equipped boots with no socketed gems. So you're missing 4 gem sockets for this modifier, which definitely is really good. But again, if you want to use Lead of the Primordial, I don't think you could use this. You need those 4 gem sockets for your, at least, you're just so socket pressured at that point. So it's also kind of a luxury thing to begin with. I mean, this isn't going to like fundamentally change the build. It's just going to make T17s a lot easier. Petrification things not being annoying and all that jazz. But I personally have been running T17s with crazy mods. If I'm petrified, it doesn't matter because nothing can kill me. If you have the Aegis thing, like, it doesn't matter if you're not hitting and leeching, like, you're still just not going to die. So personally, I just think the action speed thing isn't that important. But if it's something you really, really like and aren't going to run Lead with the Primordial, then yeah, you can absolutely run this, and there is a lot of people running it, so it's a very viable option. Alright, so I'm going to show you the Dagger Craft, and this is the highest end dagger that you can make. It's not too much different from the like mid-budget type daggers and stuff, so I'm just going to demonstrate this one because it's so similar to the other ones. And I haven't done this craft in game yet, but I will. So we're going to go Rune Dagger. The base you want is Imperial Skein, and you want it to be between level 76 and 82. If you go 83 and up, there's a part in the craft that's a guarantee that you won't be able to guarantee anymore, so make sure it's 76 through 82. First thing you're going to do is you're going to look for a base that has crit multi, tier 1, fractured, which are probably pretty cheap this league because of the Genesis tree. I would like to retry and get a higher number. Okay, yeah, we'll say 38. Now that you have your base, make it rare. And then you're going to want to use the Essences of Zeal. Oh, this is supposed to be fractured. There we go. You want to use Essences of Zeal until you get either tier 1% crit chance for the weapon or tier 1% spell crit, depending on whether you have Cyclone doing 100% crit or not. If you need the crit chance on the dagger for you to get 100% crit on the Cyclone, then that's the one you want. And I'll just settle with whichever one I land. Okay, I got the spell crit, so that's what we're settling on for this. Again, if you just wanted the regular crit, you just wait until you get regular crit. So now that that's there, we do suffixes cannot be changed. And you can do the Wild Bristle Matron if you want to save some money and not spend all the divines, but for the sake of this, we're doing it like this because it's easier here. And now that suffixes are locked, you want a Veiled Chaos Orb. And every time you Veiled Chaos Orb, if you end up having to do it multiple times, always craft a %fizz modifier before you unveil, because you're blocking the biggest pool of mods in the veiling or unveil process that are mods you don't want. And when you unveil, you're looking for spell damage, % spell damage. Didn't get it here. So now we have to craft suffix can be changed again. And you scour the item. You can't Veiled Chaos immediately because it already has a Veiled modifier on it. So you have to scour first, and then suffix is going to be changed again. And then you Veiled Orb again. And now once again, I'm going to craft the %fizz. I'm going to unveil this. There's the spell damage, it's very good. And so what you do now, and by the way, this was a crafted modifier. It's just that I clicked on the one that wasn't. So like this is crafted in the game. And so I'm going to remove that crafted modifier. And what you do now is you craft suffixes cannot be changed once again. And you're going to do a harvest craft. You're going to do add, remove, chaos. And you want it to remove suffixes that cannot be changed. And the modifier that it's going to give you is always going to be the same. It's going to be +1 to level of chaos skill gems. And so if you hit the suffix that cannot be changed and win, then you're done. But if you hit the spell damage, then you have to restart with the suffix that cannot be changed Veiled Orb process. And so in our case, we succeeded. So just remember that if you fail this and you hit the spell damage and you remove the spell damage, then from this point you have to do suffix can be changed, scour the item again, and Veiled Chaos Orb again, and do the same thing. But now at this point, this item is done. All you have to do is craft hits cannot be evaded, and this is the dagger done. Alright, that's it for me. I'm moderately happy with the way it turned out, all things considered. But I do just want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope that some of this stuff was useful. I hope that maybe I got you hooked on a new build idea. And every single path of building for all of the 3 different characters that I mentioned here are all linked in the description. The medium budget character, my current character, which is like the start of a high budget character, and then a sort of peak of the build with the Wands So Good character, all linked in the description. If you have other questions or you want follow-up information, or maybe I missed something that you thought of, feel free to comment on the video and ask. I will read it and I will respond. Or you can join our Discord. There's like loads of people that are always willing to help with any questions. I don't know if any of them play this build in particular, but I'm sure that there's people who have knowledge on it. But if not, I'm also there and I'll answer any questions that you have. Link for that also in the description. And if you wouldn't mind, give me a little likey, a little subscribe. Means a lot. Thank you again for watching. And there might be some follow-up videos on this build, like once I make progress on it. So if you're interested, keep an eye out.